Physics can explain almost everything, except why anything exists at all. You've probably never questioned that. You were taught that science is the ultimate tool, the final authority, the system that can eventually answer any question if we just push far enough. And for most of your life, that belief has quietly guided how you see the world. There is always a reason. Always a deeper layer, always another explanation waiting to be discovered. But what if that's not true? What if the chain of explanations you trust so completely doesn't go on forever? Think about it carefully. Every time you ask why, you expect an answer, and every answer feels like progress, like you're getting closer to something solid. But each answer only leads to another question, and then another, and another. At some point, something strange begins to happen. The questions don't stop, but the answers do. You reach a point where physics can describe what happens with stunning precision, yet it cannot tell you why it happens at all. And in that moment, something uncomfortable settles in. Maybe reality doesn't have an explanation. Maybe it simply exists. And that possibility changes everything you thought you understood before. From the moment you first learned about the world, everything seemed to follow a comforting pattern. You see an object, and someone tells you it's made of smaller parts. A table becomes wood, wood becomes molecules, molecules become atoms. It feels like progress. Like peeling back layers of reality and getting closer to something fundamental. Then it goes deeper. Atoms are made of particles. Particles follow laws. Those laws are written in the language of physics, precise and elegant, capable of predicting outcomes with astonishing accuracy. At every step, the story feels complete. You ask a question, and science gives you an answer, and not just any answer, but one backed by experiments, equations, and decades of human effort. It builds trust. It builds confidence. It makes you believe that if you keep asking questions, you will eventually reach the bottom. But there's a subtle shift that most people never notice. When you move from objects to atoms, from atoms to particles, from particles to laws, something quietly disappears. The answers stop feeling like explanations and start feeling like descriptions. Physics tells you how things behave, how they interact, how they evolve over time. It maps reality with incredible precision, but then a different kind of question appears. What explains the laws themselves? Why these laws and not others? Why this structure of reality instead of something completely different or nothing at all? And suddenly the confidence begins to crack, because the deeper you go, the more it feels like something is missing. Now follow this carefully, because this is where the ground starts to disappear beneath your feet. Take something simple. An apple falls from a tree. You ask why, and the answer is gravity. That feels satisfying. It feels complete. But then you ask the next question. Why does gravity exist? And physics gives you another answer. Gravity is not a force in the traditional sense, but a curvature of space-time caused by mass and energy. Again, it feels deeper, more refined, more fundamental. But the question doesn't go away. It shifts. Why does space-time curve that way? Why does mass tell space-time how to bend and space-time tell objects how to move? At this point, the answers begin to thin out. You might hear about Einstein's equations, about geometry, about how the universe behaves. But notice what's happening. The explanation is no longer explaining. It's describing patterns with incredible precision, but it never answers the original why. So you push further. Why those equations? Why that structure? Why anything at all? And here, something unsettling emerges. Every explanation demands another explanation behind it. Each answer opens a new question, like a door leading to another door, then another, with no final room waiting at the end. There is no clear stopping point, no ultimate explanation that closes the chain. This is the infinite regress. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, because no matter how far you go, the question still stands, quietly waiting. Why? This is the point where physics, despite all its power, quietly reaches its limit. Not because it fails, but because it was never designed to answer the question you're asking. Physics gives you laws, clean, elegant, mathematically precise laws that describe how reality behaves, and those laws work unbelievably well. They predict the motion of planets, the behavior of particles, the structure of atoms. They allow us to build technology, explore space, and manipulate matter at the smallest scales. But look closely at what those laws actually do. They describe patterns. They tell you what happens when certain conditions are met. They don't tell you why those patterns exist in the first place. Take something as fundamental as the speed of light. It has a specific value, not faster, not slower. That number shapes the entire structure of reality. It determines causality, time, energy, everything. But why that number? Physics doesn't tell you, it simply measures it and builds everything around it. Or consider the fundamental constants of nature. Numbers that define the strength of forces, the mass of particles, the behavior of the universe itself. Change them even slightly, and reality as you know it collapses. Yet physics offers no deeper explanation for why those numbers are what they are. At this level, something becomes undeniable. We can describe reality with extraordinary precision. We can write equations that predict outcomes to 10 decimal places. We can model systems so accurately that entire industries depend on it. And still, we don't know why any of it exists. This is the boundary layer of physics, a place where knowledge becomes incredibly sharp, yet explanation quietly disappears. And that contrast is what makes it so unsettling. At this point, you might think the answer is simply that we haven't gone deep enough yet, that somewhere hidden beneath everything we currently understand, there must be a final theory, a complete framework that explains not just how the universe behaves, but why it exists in the first place, and physics has certainly tried. Quantum mechanics reveals a world where certainty dissolves into probability, where particles don't even have definite properties until they are measured. Quantum field theory goes further, telling us that what we call particles are just excitations in underlying fields that fill all of space. Then there are ideas like string theory, suggesting that everything we see might arise from tiny vibrating strings existing in higher dimensions. Each of these theories feels deeper, more fundamental, more complete. They seem to promise that we are getting closer to the ultimate answer. But look carefully at what they actually provide. They give you better descriptions, more powerful equations, more accurate predictions. They unify forces, connect ideas, and reveal hidden structures behind reality. Yet they all share the same limitation. They assume the existence of laws, no matter how elegant the theory becomes. No matter how unified or complete it appears, it still rests on a set of rules that are simply taken as given. The equations exist, the framework exists, the structure exists, and the question remains untouched. Why these laws? Why this structure? Why anything at all instead of nothing? Even if we discovered a perfect theory of everything tomorrow, one equation that describes the entire universe in flawless detail, it would still leave that question unanswered, because explanation, at its deepest level, does not explain existence itself. So naturally, the mind tries to escape. It looks for another way out, another layer where the question might finally be resolved. And over time, several possibilities have emerged, each one attempting to close the gap that physics leaves open. One idea is that the laws of physics are simply brute facts. They exist without explanation, the way a rule in a game exists because it does. There is no deeper reason. This is just how reality is. But even that answer feels incomplete because the question immediately returns, why these brute facts and not others? Another possibility is that reality is mathematically inevitable, that the universe exists because it must, because the underlying structure of mathematics allows no alternative. But again, the same tension appears. Why those mathematical structures? Why does mathematics itself exist? Then there's the simulation hypothesis, the idea that our universe is the product of some higher-level system, perhaps created by an advanced intelligence. It feels like an explanation until you realize it only shifts the problem upward. What explains the system that created the simulation? What explains its laws? The multiverse offers yet another path. Perhaps every possible universe exists, with every possible set of laws, and we simply find ourselves in one that allows us to exist. But even here, the question lingers. Why does the multiverse exist at all? Why is there something generating all possibilities? Each idea feels like it might finally resolve the mystery, and each one inevitably leads back to the same place. Another question. At this point, something even more subtle begins to emerge, and it changes the entire perspective of the question. You are asking all of this from inside the system. That might sound obvious at first, but think about what it really means. Every question you ask, every explanation you search for, every theory you build, all of it happens within the universe you are trying to explain. You are not outside of it looking in. You are part of it, embedded in its structure, shaped by its rules, and that creates a fundamental limitation. A system cannot fully explain itself from within. Imagine a character inside a video game trying to understand the code that created their world. They can explore the environment, discover patterns, even reverse engineer parts of how things behave. But the actual source code, the reason the game exists at all, lies outside their reach. Not because it's hidden, but because their perspective is confined to the system itself. Now apply that to reality. You can study the universe, map its laws, uncover its structure, but the deeper question, why those laws exist at all, might belong to a level you simply cannot access. Not because you are missing information, but because the answer is not inside the system you are part of. And if that's true, then explanation doesn't just stop by accident, it stops by necessity. Now step back and look at everything you've just followed. Every path you tried led you here. The chain of explanations stretches backward without end. Each answer opens another question, never arriving at a final reason. When you try to stop the chain, you're left with brute facts, laws that simply exist without justification. And when you push beyond that, you run into a deeper limitation, the realization that you are asking these questions from inside the very system you're trying to explain. At first, it feels like something has gone wrong, like explanation has failed you, like there must be a missing piece we just haven't discovered yet. But what if nothing is broken at all? What if explanation itself has a boundary? Physics doesn't collapse here, it doesn't lose its power, it continues to do exactly what it was always meant to do. It reveals relationships, it tells you how things connect, how they evolve, how one event leads to another. It maps the structure of reality with incredible clarity. But existence itself is not a relationship. There is nothing deeper for it to point to, and so the search doesn't end because we ran out of intelligence or tools. It ends because we reached the edge of what explanation can ever be. So after all of this, after peeling back every layer, chasing every explanation, and pushing as far as physics can possibly take you, you arrive at something that feels almost too simple. The universe may not have a reason, it may simply be. And that idea is unsettling at first because it removes the comfort of a final answer waiting somewhere ahead. But if you stay with it, something begins to shift. The question you've been asking, the search for a deeper explanation, doesn't disappear. It transforms because you are not standing outside this mystery. You are inside it. You are not just asking the question. You are part of the question itself. Your thoughts, your awareness, your existence, all of it emerges from the very reality you're trying to explain. And maybe that's the point where understanding changes direction, not toward a final answer, but toward acceptance of something deeper. That existence doesn't need a reason to be real, that reality doesn't require a justification to exist, and that the deepest truth you can reach is not an explanation at all, but the recognition that there may be no deeper explanation waiting beyond this.